If you bought a Mustang from 1979 to 2004, it most likely came with a solid rear axle. The LX, GT, SVO, Bullet, Mach 1, and pre-New Edge Cobra didn't come from the factory with independent rear suspension. I'm a big fan of IRS swaps, but before I did them, I autocrossed solid axle Mustangs for years. Many of the novices I instruct in Fox Body, SN95, and New Edge Mustangs ask about solid axle suspension upgrades that aren't as involved or as expensive as an IRS swap. In my 1979 to 2004 budget autocross video, I reviewed mods that are legal in street class and get your solid axle to handle a lot better than stock: adjustable shocks and struts, and an adjustable rear sway bar. This video is about taking your solid rear axle to the next level. These mods will absolutely move you out of street class, but they help make grip and reduce wheel hop, two things that will definitely get you faster on course, all for around $550. What are the problems with the factory solid rear axle setup? Flex, slop, and bind. There's a lot of flex in the metal parts and slop in the rubber ones, so getting power down to the ground is tough, and if you have a lot of torque, you will get wheel hop. The design is also prone to Quadra-bind, which basically means the rear end travel is limited by the 4-link binding under hard cornering. All of these issues conspire to cost you grip and make the car handle erratically. The good news is, these problems aren't hard to solve. The upper and lower control arms are stamped steel pieces with rubber bushings. They're not very strong, and the bushings numb the feedback coming from the rear end. For autocross, the upper control arms tend to make the biggest difference in handling. They help mitigate the side-to-side movement of the rear end, which translates into less sloppiness and more confident handling. These upper control arms from Steeda are made from tubular DOM steel. They have a 3-piece urethane bushing with a hard center and soft outer sections that won't damage your upper torque boxes. They are TIG welded for strength, and, as you can see, they are much beefier than the stock pieces. The lower control arms impact traction when you launch and when you roll on the throttle out of a corner. They help get your power to the ground. The more you autocross, the more you'll be able to feel the limitations of the factory parts. These lower control arms are also from Steeda. They're made from extruded and billet steel. They are significantly stronger than stock. The 3-piece bushings help control the axle and eliminate bind. Steeda's bushings are designed to prevent damage to your lower torque boxes. A big part of getting rid of bind is the smallest part of the rear suspension, the factory differential housing bushing. Steeda provides a 2-piece urethane bushing with their upper control arms. I used them for years and they work well. But there's something new on the market that I would definitely use in a solid rear axle setup. BMR makes these spherical diff housing bearings. They're manufactured from CNC machined stainless steel with heavy-duty Teflon-lined bearings and CNC machined aluminum spacers. They are much stronger than stock or urethane bushings, and just look at the difference in articulation. I don't normally showcase parts I've never personally used in my videos. I haven't used these diff housing bearings in an autocross car. I'm making an exception in this case because it's clear to see the increased articulation and lack of deflection compared to a rubber or poly bushing. More and more autocrossers are installing these spherical diff housing bearings because they make a big difference in how the rear end feels in slaloms and sweepers. These mods will greatly improve the handling of your solid rear axle Mustang, and they'll also reduce wheel hop. Ford's fix for wheel hop was to add quad shocks. They help keep the axle from twisting up during launches and hard acceleration. After installing these parts, most people remove their quad shocks so they can fit wider tires in the rear. In my opinion, that's not a good idea for an autocross car. There is no substitute for grip. That's true, and 9 times out of 10, wider tires are the answer, provided you can keep a square setup. A staggered setup introduces understeer and prevents you from rotating your tires, so your handling suffers and you eat up those expensive autocross tires even faster. The added grip from wider tires will also lead to more wheel hop, which will get worse if your quad shocks are removed. In a solid axle Mustang, I'd rather run narrower tires with quad shocks than wider tires without them. The quad shocks are also another link helping to keep the rear end from moving side to side, giving you more consistent cornering. You don't need to buy expensive aftermarket quad shocks. I don't see a benefit in those. A good, functioning set of stock quad shocks or these economical KYB replacements will do the job. Keep in mind the KYBs have a covered piston, which makes them wider than the factory design. Ford used a bunch of different rear sway bars from 1979 to 2004, and some models didn't even come with one. I used the later Model 23mm hollow sway bars. They help with body roll and are lighter than the factory solid bars. Steeda's upper control arms are well designed and well made. They are listed as fitting 79 to 04, but 97.5 to 98 cars require an adjustable upper control arm. Steeda provides good instructions and the arms install easily. You will need jack stands to support the rear end and a jack to raise the pumpkin to help line up the bolt holes. You can also use a screwdriver or drift to help align the holes. Use plenty of the supplied grease on the bushing surfaces wherever they touch metal. They take about an hour to install. After 5 years of autocrossing, doing about 30 events a year, my upper torque boxes showed no sign of damage. The BMR differential housing bearings come with great instructions that include black and white pictures, and they have a color version of the instructions on their website. It can be hard to get the bushing shell out if you've previously removed the rubber, but a good air hammer will get the job done. If the rubber bushing is still in the shell, use a bushing removal tool. I haven't installed a set on my car yet, but I'd estimate it'll take about an hour. Steeda's lower control arms are also well engineered and well built. They come with detailed instructions. It's a good idea to check your torque boxes to see if they need to be spread out a little prior to the install. And be sure to support the lower control arm with a jack as you install the spring. Remember, the spring can fly out and hurt you. Like the upper control arms, a screwdriver or drift can help line up the bolt holes on the rear axle. Sometimes, jacking up the opposite side can make aligning the holes a little easier. With these arms on the car, autocrossing did no damage to my lower torque boxes. The lower control arms take about an hour and a half to install. The KYB Quad Shocks don't come with instructions. They do come with spacers to keep the shock from hitting the frame. With stock or aftermarket quad shocks, I use a large zip tie to keep the piston compressed as I bolt it to the frame. Then I line up the shock with the hole on the rear end, get my bolt ready, then cut the zip tie and let the shock decompress into position. The install can be a bit tricky, but should only take about 30 minutes. Some aftermarket parts suppliers claim factory rear sway bars break easily. I've used solid and hollow factory sway bars for a long time, and I've never broken one, on course or off. You can find factory rear sway bars on eBay. MPS Auto Salvage is a great resource for used Mustang parts. You can swap out the sway bar in 30 minutes. I used all of these parts, except for the spherical diff housing bearings, in the rear suspension of my 1992 GT and my 2000 GT for years. I won several local events, a local championship, and 2 state championships. Both of those cars had improved stock-style front suspension, adjustable shocks and struts, and an additional adjustable rear sway bar. It's really important to note that the mods in this video work much better when combined with adjustable shocks and an adjustable rear sway bar. 1979 to 2004 solid rear axle Mustangs are notorious for going sideways when pushed to the limit. The factory rear control arms and bushings were never meant to carve corners like you find on an autocross course. Sudden changes of direction make the cars nervous and unpredictable, which makes you back off. Parts that eliminate flex, slop, and bind allow you to attack with confidence. They maximize the potential of the stock-style rear suspension, and they let you know what the rear tires are doing at all times. Before the mods, I was guessing when I could get back on the gas, and if I guessed wrong, the car would swap ends faster than I could blink. But now, I know exactly when I can get on the throttle, and I can accelerate harder and earlier than ever before. In the slaloms, the car is much more composed and capable, and I don't feel like I'm fighting the forelink or the bushings as the suspension loads and unloads side to side. If you're autocrossing a 1979 to 2004 Mustang with a solid rear axle and you're looking to improve the rear suspension, installing Steeda upper and lower control arms, BMR spherical differential housing bearings, and using a decent set of quad shocks and a 23mm factory sway bar will absolutely stop the slop and hop.